June 19, 1944. Task Force 58 moves steadily 200 miles west of the Mariana Islands. The carriers USS Enterprise, Lexington, Bunker Hill, Yorktown, and 11 others launch waves of Grumman F6F Hellcats toward the oncoming Japanese fleet. Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher commands the American carrier force from his flagship, the Lexington. 15 carriers carrying a total of 905 aircraft are about to meet Imperial Japan's desperate effort to halt the American push toward their homeland. What Japanese aviators will encounter this morning will forever change their understanding of aerial warfare. On board the carrier Taiho, Lieutenant Warrant Officer Sakio Komatsu adjusts his flight suit in the ready room at 0730. The morning briefing stressed one goal: deliver a massive strike against the American carriers detected east of Guam. Intelligence reports indicated 15 large flat tops operating in 3 task groups southwest of Saipan. Komatsu prepares to fly escort for the second attack wave, the one expected to deal a decisive blow to the American invasion force. His aircraft is fitted with a centerline drop tank, extending its range to over 1,000 nautical miles and turning the agile fighter into a long-range escort. Japan's attack doctrine was born from its early wartime triumphs in 1941 and 1942, devastating carrier strikes at Pearl Harbor, Darwin, and beyond. These successes came from perfectly coordinated attacks by elite pilots, flying what were then the best aircraft in the world. Commander Minoru Genda had developed tactics to fully exploit the Zero's unmatched maneuverability and range against Allied planes. The strategy centered on the Zero's ability to outturn any enemy fighter while staying longer in combat than most American planes. A skilled pilot could dominate the skies through superior positioning and energy control, even when outnumbered. But now, Task Force 58 stands as the most powerful carrier force the U.S. has ever assembled. The 15 carriers include 6 Essex-class ships, each displacing 27,000 tons and built with reinforced flight decks capable of handling heavier aircraft. Unlike Japan's lightly built carriers designed for maximum plane capacity, the Americans favor strength and damage control. Their philosophy sacrifices some speed for resilience, a choice that greatly improves survival in combat. The F6F Hellcat entered service in late 1943, a direct response to lessons learned fighting the Zero. Grumman engineers designed it specifically to counter Japanese fighters, drawing from captured aircraft and pilot reports. Fully loaded, the Hellcat weighs around 12,000 pounds and is powered by a 2,000-horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, pushing it to 380 miles per hour. Its protection is formidable: 212 pounds of armor shielding the pilot, oil cooler and oil tank. Self-sealing fuel tanks reduce the risk of deadly fires, and 6.52 caliber Browning machine guns, each with 400 rounds, give it firepower unmatched by any Japanese fighter. Meanwhile, Japanese carriers Taiho, Shokaku, and Zuikaku launch 128 aircraft toward Task Force 58 from 24,000 feet. The formation spots no American planes during approach. It seems they've caught the enemy by surprise. Yet most of these pilots finished training only months earlier, with barely 100 total flight hours. The training program, once 3 years long, had been slashed to 6 months as Japan's pilot losses mounted through 1943. Basic combat maneuvers were rushed, replaced by hours of navigation and formation drills. Many trainees practiced just 5 carrier landings before being sent into combat. Among them, Lieutenant Junior Grade Tishi Yamamoto is one of the few veterans left, a pilot with over 600 combat hours since He has fought over the Dutch East Indies and Rabaul, where Japanese naval aviation once reigned supreme. The Zero's aura of invincibility still lingered through 1942, even as Allied resistance grew stronger. But during the Guadalcanal campaign, cracks began to show. American pilots developed counter-tactics that neutralized Japan's once dominant fighters. The thatch-weave defensive maneuver canceled out the Zero's turning edge, while hit-and-run attacks exploited its lack of armor. Flying beside Yamamoto is Ensign Hiroshi Tanaka, fresh out of a shortened training course just 10 weeks ago. He's logged only 75 flight hours and has learned aerial combat mostly from lectures, not practice. Fuel shortages forced Japan to cancel advanced combat training, and the lack of ammunition meant new pilots practiced gunnery only on stationary ground targets. Many had never fired at a moving aircraft before facing real combat. The gap between seasoned veterans and inexperienced replacements created serious tactical problems for Japanese formations. Skilled pilots now had to fight enemy aircraft while simultaneously shielding their green wingmen, who often had little awareness of what was happening around them. This responsibility made the formations less effective overall. Veterans couldn't fully use their experience while guiding rookies through their first battles. Meanwhile, radar operators aboard USS Yorktown detected the incoming Japanese strike 150 miles out, giving Task Force 58 a crucial 20-minute warning. Fighter directors immediately began vectoring combat air patrols to precise intercept points using radar plotting. This kind of coordination revolutionized air defense. Instead of scrambling reactively, American fighters now launched controlled interceptions with altitude and positional advantages. The fighter director system, perfected over 2 years of combat, gave the U.S. Navy a level of command and control unmatched by any other force. Each carrier maintained a combat information center where trained officers tracked every contact on radar screens in real time. Through radio communication, these directors guided airborne fighters with precise tactical instructions, ensuring they struck from the best positions. This centralized coordination made defenses far more efficient by concentrating firepower where it mattered most. Commander David McCampbell, leading VF-15's 1st Division from USS Essex, pushed his 12 Hellcats to full power as they climbed toward the incoming Japanese formation. The Hellcats held a tight formation, following radar vectors toward their targets. Each pilot averaged more than 300 hours of flight time, all extensively trained in gunnery and tactics back in the States. By 1943, the U.S. Navy had dramatically expanded its training program, producing over 10,000 new naval aviators each year. Operational training units now offered roughly 500 hours of total flight experience, including 150 hours in combat-type aircraft. Advanced courses focused on deflection shooting, energy fighting, and teamwork against simulated enemy aircraft. The Hellcat itself embodied this philosophy, a machine built to keep its pilot alive. Armor plating surrounded the cockpit, seatback, headrest, and floor panels, adding up to more than 200 pounds of protection. Its bulletproof windscreen, made of 1.5-inch laminated glass, could stop 7.7mm bullets, even at point-blank range. The self-sealing fuel tanks used layered rubber that swelled when punctured, sealing leaks and preventing deadly fires. The aircraft's rugged frame could take enormous punishment and still fly. Tests proved the Hellcat could survive multiple 20mm cannon hits and remain controllable. That toughness gave pilots huge confidence. They knew their plane could bring them home from battles that would have destroyed enemy fighters. At 09:15, about 90 miles west of Guam, the Japanese formation finally met the first wave of Hellcats. The Americans dove from above and behind, using altitude for high-speed attacks. Ensign Tanaka broke left, hoping to force an overshoot, but the Hellcat stuck with him, its superior power allowing it to sustain turns at speeds where the Zero's controls stiffened and lost responsiveness. .50 caliber bullets tore through Tanaka's aircraft, severing control cables and rupturing his fuel tanks, which erupted instantly. The Zero's paper-thin skin and lack of armor turned the hit into a death sentence. Flames reached the wing tanks, and the plane exploded, a grim example of how fragile Japan's once-feared fighter had become against concentrated American firepower. The sudden destruction stunned the formation. Everything Japanese pilots had believed about their aircraft's superiority was shattered in moments. Panic rippled through the ranks as more Zeros went down just as easily. Commander McCampbell's division kept pressing their advantage, slicing through the enemy formation with coordinated high-speed attacks. Diving from 28,000 feet, Hellcats reached speeds of over 450 mph before climbing back to strike again. This hit-and-zoom style of fighting completely nullified the Zero's agility advantage and exploited its poor handling at high speeds. Japanese pilots tried to draw the Americans into classic turning dogfights, but the Hellcats never took the bait. Each Hellcat pilot sticks to strict energy discipline, refusing to slow down for turning fights where the Zero holds the advantage. The Americans fight as a cohesive unit. Wingmen cover their leaders during attack runs and maintain mutual protection throughout the engagement. This level of coordination reflects their extensive multi-aircraft training, which emphasizes section and division tactics rather than individual heroics. The Hellcat's reliable radio system allows clear communication, even amid heavy electromagnetic interference from dozens of aircraft transmitting simultaneously. Japanese pilots, on the other hand, struggle with poor radio equipment that constantly emits static and feedback, making coordination nearly impossible. Many Zero pilots simply switch their radios off, relying instead on hand signals and rigid pre-briefed formations. This lack of communication worsens their tactical disadvantage. Formations quickly fall apart under the pressure of organized American attacks. The first clash ends disastrously for Japan. Within just 8 minutes, 12 Zeros are shot down. American pilots notice several things that contradict earlier intelligence reports. The Japanese gunnery is weak, with most bursts missing wide behind their targets, and their evasive maneuvers are repetitive and predictable, revealing shallow training and limited tactical imagination. Some Japanese pilots even abandon strong attack positions out of confusion or inexperience, missing brief chances to strike when Hellcats expose vulnerable angles. Lieutenant Alexander Vrechu from VF-16 aboard USS Lexington intercepts another enemy group, attempting to break through the fighter screen. His section of 4 Hellcats engages 12 enemy planes and downs 6 of them in just 8 minutes. Vrechu fires only 360 of his 2,400 available rounds, a testament to the precision of American gunnery training. The concentrated fire from 6.50 caliber Browning guns simply tears through the Zero's fragile frame. Even short bursts are devastating. Wings snap off, engines explode, and fuel tanks erupt into fire as incendiary rounds hit. As the battle unfolds, the technological gap becomes unmistakable. Hellcats can take multiple hits from the Japanese 7.7mm guns and keep flying, while their own fire shreds Zeros with minimal ammunition use. Pilots report enemy aircraft disintegrating after only 2 or 3 seconds of accurate fire. The Zero's 20mm cannons are dangerous in theory, but their low muzzle velocity and tiny ammunition supply make them far less effective in practice. Many Japanese pilots waste their shells in uncontrolled bursts, soon left with only rifle-caliber guns for the rest of the fight. Radar-guided fighter control keeps the Americans perfectly organized. Controllers on the carriers constantly update positions, vectoring new flights to intercept each wave of attackers. They always know where every group is, thanks to radar plots and pilot reports, ensuring fresh fighters are in the right place at the right time. This systematic defense prevents Japan from massing a large, unified strike. Instead, scattered enemy groups arrive piecemeal, only to meet tight Hellcat formations waiting in perfect intercept positions. The attackers are whittled down long before they can reach the American carriers. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa orders a second massive wave at 08:56 a.m., 128 aircraft from every carrier still operational. The strike includes 48 Zeros, 53 Judy dive bombers, and 27 Jill torpedo bombers, an all-out effort to overwhelm the U.S. defenses with sheer numbers. But the plan falters almost immediately. Many inexperienced pilots can't navigate properly, and formations scatter during the long approach. Some groups get completely lost, burning through precious fuel as they circle aimlessly over open ocean. Lieutenant Russell Reiser of VF-31 aboard USS Cabot spots the lead elements of the second wave about 60 miles from the task force. His division of Hellcats dives from the sun, achieving total surprise. The Japanese, failing to keep proper visual watch, don't notice until the Americans open fire. Within moments, 5 enemy planes spiral into the sea, trailing smoke and fire. The rest press on, only to meet more Hellcats stacked in layered formations at multiple altitudes. Each interception unfolds the same way: high-speed diving attacks followed by zoom climbs back to altitude, keeping the Americans always above and in control. The Hellcats maintain their energy advantage throughout, dictating the pace of every engagement and denying the Japanese any chance to turn the tables. This dominance comes from both superior aircraft performance and disciplined training in energy fighting. The Zero pilots, taught to rely on close-range turning combat, find themselves helpless in the fast vertical battles where their planes simply can't keep up.
The second Japanese wave achieves almost nothing. A few survivors break through the fighter screen, but in scattered, uncoordinated groups, anti-aircraft guns from destroyers and cruisers fill the sky with exploding shells, further breaking up the formations. The few aircraft that reach the carriers face a wall of defensive fire from multiple ships firing proximity-fused shells. Only one torpedo bomber manages to release its weapon. USS Indiana easily evades it with a quick turn. Commander McCampbell, leading VF-15's second strike group, encounters the third Japanese wave around 11 a.m. His 12 Hellcats dive into a running battle against more than 40 enemy aircraft that lasts nearly 20 minutes. McCampbell personally downs 7 enemy planes, while his wingman, Lieutenant Roy Rushing, adds 4 more. The engagement perfectly illustrates the impact of American training. Experienced pilots exploit every Japanese mistake. Enemy formations disintegrate into lone aircraft, dodging for survival and abandoning their attack missions. Lieutenant Commander Kenji Suzuki watches the disaster unfold from his damaged Zero, limping back toward the fleet. His plane is riddled with .50 caliber holes, 1 elevator cable is cut, and the engine barely runs. The losses are staggering, far worse than at Midway, where at least some aircraft had reached their targets. This time, dozens of planes and countless skilled pilots are lost, accomplishing virtually nothing. Returning aviators report a shocking discovery. They faced a completely new American fighter with unprecedented performance. Previous intelligence, based on captured F4F Wildcats, had concluded that American fighters were still inferior to the latest Zeros, except in dive speed. But the Hellcat could outclimb, outturn at high speeds, and take incredible punishment, overturning everything the Japanese believed about air combat. It was a machine seemingly built to exploit every weakness of the Zero and erase all its traditional strengths. Aboard Taiho, Admiral Ozawa receives fragmented reports of catastrophic losses from all 3 attack waves. Survivors describe being swarmed by American fighters appearing from every direction and altitude. The Americans' coordinated defense prevents any concentrated attack and inflicts devastating losses instead.
Radio intercepts confirm what the Japanese already suspect. U.S. losses are minimal, despite engaging superior numbers throughout the morning. On the Japanese carriers, operations officers record grim figures as aircraft fail to return. Of the 69 planes launched in the first wave, only 27 limp back, most heavily damaged. The second wave fares even worse. Barely a third of its 128 aircraft survived the fighter gauntlet. And these weren't just planes lost. They were highly trained pilots, the product of years of peacetime preparation. The defeat goes beyond the tactical level. It signals the collapse of Japan's naval air power. Returning pilots show clear signs of shock and trauma. Many of the young flyers who had graduated mere weeks earlier described feelings of helpless terror, their 7.7mm machine guns useless, their planes shredded by the Americans' deadly .50 caliber fire. The myth of the Zero's invincibility dies before their eyes. Veterans like Yamamoto struggle to grasp the total reversal of fortune. The combat tactics that once dominated the skies over China, Southeast Asia, and the early Pacific now fail completely. Years of experience mean nothing when the enemy refuses to fight on familiar terms. The very foundation of Japanese naval aviation, belief in superior skill in aircraft, collapses in a single morning. Morale on the carriers plummets as crewmen stare at the empty spots on the deck where their friends' planes should have landed. Flight decks built to hold 75 planes now sit nearly bare. Mechanics and armorers stand idle, no aircraft to repair, no weapons to load. The human toll of the disaster becomes painfully clear as they wait in vain for squadrons that will never return. Admiral Ozawa faces a grim decision. A fourth wave of 82 aircraft is ready to launch, but reconnaissance confirms that the American carriers remain fully operational despite enduring 3 massive strikes. Sending another wave would only throw away more men and machines against an enemy with overwhelming technical and tactical superiority. Yet retreat would mean abandoning the garrison on Saipan, a public admission of defeat in what Japan had called the decisive battle for the Pacific. Communication between the fleet's command and its pilots breaks down completely. Confused reports come in. Some pilots exaggerate enemy numbers, others contradict each other entirely. Staff officers struggle to piece together a coherent picture. Cultural pride blinds many senior commanders. They refuse to believe that American aircraft could dominate their best pilots so completely. The truth is brutal. The F6F Hellcat's superiority lies in every element of its design. Its Pratt & Whitney R2800 double WASP engine delivers 2,000 horsepower, nearly twice that of the Zero's 1,030 horsepower Sakai 21 engine. That extra power translates into faster climbs, better acceleration, and vastly improved high-altitude performance, where the Zero's weak power-to-weight ratio leaves it gasping. The Hellcat can climb at 3,500 feet per minute compared to the Zero's 2,600, giving American pilots a constant energy advantage. Its 6.5 caliber Browning machine guns, each with 400 rounds, deliver crushing firepower with flat trajectories and lethal accuracy. Each weapon spits 850 rounds per minute at a muzzle velocity of 2,900 feet per second, giving the Hellcat unmatched hitting power in every engagement.
Together, the Hellcat's 6 Browning machine guns unleash over 100 rounds per second of armor-piercing incendiary ammunition, powerful enough to punch through engine blocks and ignite fuel tanks. With a 30-second total firing time, pilots can engage multiple targets without worrying about conserving ammunition. The Zero's armament, 2 20mm Type 99 cannons and 2 7.7mm Type 97 machine guns, looks superior on paper thanks to its explosive shells. In practice, however, the cannon's low muzzle velocity of just 2,460 foot causes heavy bullet drop, forcing pilots to adjust their aim differently from their machine guns. Each cannon carries only 60 rounds, forcing strict fire discipline and drastically reducing the sustained rate of fire. The 7.7mm machine guns, though rapid firing, simply lack the power to damage the armored Hellcats, and even 700 rounds per gun can't make up for that weakness. Meanwhile, American radar technology gives the U.S. fleet a decisive tactical edge. The SK air search radar detects incoming aircraft at over 100 miles, while the SM height-finding radar pinpoints altitude with 500-foot accuracy. All this data feeds into the carrier's combat information centers, where trained officers track every contact on large plotting boards. Fighter directors use VHF radio to vector defending aircraft precisely, maintaining clear communications despite static or interference. This fully integrated system turns air defense from individual pilot reactions into a coordinated, data-driven operation. The Japanese, by contrast, rely mostly on visual spotting. Their Type 21 radar, fitted to only a few ships, detects planes at barely 60 miles, often giving false returns and offering no altitude data. Without proper height finding or centralized fighter control, Japan's combat air patrols fly independently, following outdated pre-war tactics. The lack of coordination means they can't effectively distribute fighters across multiple threats or adapt quickly once battle begins.
By late 1944, the average new Japanese Navy pilot graduated with just 40 hours of flight time, compared to 525 hours for an American. U.S. pilots undergo rigorous gunnery practice, their performance recorded with camera guns during mock dogfights. They train equally hard in formation tactics, energy fighting, and mutual support. Operational training units simulate real combat, with experienced frontline veterans as instructors. In contrast, Japanese replacements arrive with roughly 100 total hours, little combat practice, and minimal exposure to modern aircraft. Fuel shortages force reliance on classroom theory and brief flights in outdated trainers. Many never fire at an aerial target before combat, and their formation flying favors parade precision over tactical adaptability. Advanced skills like aerobatics, instrument flying, and night operations, once staples of pre-war training, are dropped entirely. This erosion of pilot quality amplifies the gap in aircraft performance. Still, despite catastrophic earlier losses, Admiral Ozawa orders a fourth strike. He commits his last 82 planes, hoping for even a token success before retreating west. But these aircraft run into an even tighter American defense. Carriers have already recovered, refueled, and launched fresh combat patrols. The slaughter continues with mechanical precision. Hellcats stacked at different altitudes intercept each new wave before it can close in. By 2:30 p.m., American reconnaissance planes spot the Japanese fleet 275 miles west-northwest of Task Force 58. Seizing the opportunity, Admiral Mitcher orders a massive counterstrike, 216 aircraft in total, despite the long range and tight fuel margins. 85 Hellcats join the raid, proving their strength not only as defenders, but as lethal offensive fighters. While Japan's carriers can barely muster a few patrols, America's respond with overwhelming force. The transformation from morning defense to afternoon offense marks the clearest display yet of U.S. naval air superiority.
When the American strike force arrives, the Japanese carriers are virtually defenseless. Only 35 operational fighters remain out of more than 400 that took off that morning. Hellcats brush aside the few planes that rise to challenge them, while dive bombers and torpedo planes strike with near-total freedom. The carrier Ho sinks after taking multiple torpedo hits, while Zukaku and Chiyoda are left burning and crippled by repeated bomb impacts. Japanese anti-aircraft fire proves largely ineffective against the disciplined, coordinated attacks carried out by experienced American pilots. As the sun sets, the returning strike groups face new danger, the vast ocean below now completely dark, their carriers invisible. Admiral Mitcher makes a bold, unprecedented decision. He orders his ships to turn on their lights. Searchlights and deck lights blaze to life across the task force, risking submarine detection but guiding hundreds of exhausted pilots home. It's a calculated gamble, one that places the lives of his air crews above strict naval security, and it works. Though 80 aircraft are lost to fuel exhaustion or crash landings, over 85% of their crews are rescued, many pulled from the water by destroyers sweeping the area. Through the night, the carriers refuel, rearm, and prepare for dawn operations. By morning, Admiral Ozawa orders his fleet to retreat. Of the 430 aircraft that began the day, only 35 are still airworthy. The Japanese Navy, which had entered the battle expecting a decisive victory, now flees in total defeat, its carrier air power annihilated. The final loss ratio is staggering, more than 10 Japanese aircraft destroyed for every American plane lost. Japan's once feared naval air arm ceases to exist as an offensive force. With no fuel, no pilots, and no time left to rebuild, its defeat marks the end of Japanese carrier dominance in the Pacific. The Battle of the Philippine Sea proves that technology and training can completely dismantle even the most determined enemy doctrine. For years, Japan's naval aviation had been unmatched. Between 1941 and 1942, the Zero fighter and its elite pilots swept the skies, winning decisive victories from Pearl Harbor to the Indian Ocean. Their planes were light, agile, and long-ranged, and their pilots entered battle with unshakable confidence, while Allied flyers went in expecting defeat. The Hellcat changed everything. Built from the ground up to counter the Zero, it sacrificed lightness for armor and self-sealing tanks, turning survivability into its greatest weapon. Its powerful engine gave it the speed and climb to choose when and where to fight, denying Japanese pilots the turning duels they relied on. Its 6.50 caliber guns delivered brutal, sustained firepower that shredded the fragile, lightly built Japanese aircraft. The contrast extended beyond the planes themselves. America's massive systematic training program reflected an industrial approach to warfare, a triumph of organization over artistry. While Japan scrambled to train a few hundred replacements through rushed programs, the U.S. produced thousands of skilled aviators each year through standardized instruction and extensive flight hours. Every American pilot was trained to the same standard, a replaceable part in a vast, efficient machine. The loss of one pilot no longer crippled a unit. Another equally capable aviator stood ready. This consistency, coupled with technology, made the U.S. Navy unstoppable. Radar-directed fighter control gave commanders an unprecedented edge, turning early warning into tactical mastery. By positioning interceptors before the enemy even appeared, the Americans stripped the Japanese of their one remaining advantage: surprise. Their carrier groups had evolved from vulnerable floating airfields into near-impenetrable fortresses, shielded by layers of fighters, guns, and sensors working as one. Japan's rigid pre-war doctrine, built on the dream of a single decisive battle, could not survive this new reality. Against an enemy willing to fight a long, grinding campaign instead of one glorious clash, Japan's strategy was obsolete. The Americans fought with patience, relying on their industrial might and logistical strength. Victory no longer depended on a single day's result. It was inevitable through persistence and production. The cost for Japan went beyond planes and pilots. Lost with them was the very soul of its naval aviation, the elite, combat-tested generation whose knowledge and experience had taken years to build. With their destruction, an era ended, and the balance of power in the Pacific shifted forever. The loss of Japan's veteran pilots could never be replaced. Wartime crash courses produced flyers with just enough skill to take off and land, but not to survive real combat. As inexperienced pilots died in greater numbers, the overall quality of Japan's air arms spiraled downward. Meanwhile, Task Force 58 pressed on with operations off Saipan, shrugging off Japan's failed attempts to disrupt the invasion by air. At dawn on June 20th, American carriers launched new searches for Ozawa's retreating fleet while maintaining patrols against land-based threats. Pilots who had fought the day before described the battle as just like an old-time turkey shoot, a phrase that captured both the one-sided slaughter and the cold mechanical efficiency with which Japanese aircraft were destroyed. The final numbers were staggering: 445 Japanese aircraft destroyed, 395 carrier-based and about 50 land-based. American losses totaled 123 planes, most lost to fuel exhaustion or landing accidents rather than enemy fire. Only 43 U.S. aircraft were shot down by Japanese guns or fighters in 2 days of furious battle. The resulting 10-to-1 kill ratio surpassed even the legendary victory at Midway. More devastating still, over 400 Japanese pilots were killed, including seasoned instructors recalled from training units, the last remnants of Japan's pre-war elite. In his report to Fleet Headquarters, Admiral Ozawa acknowledged what was now undeniable: Japan's carrier aviation was finished as an offensive force. His surviving carriers still had decks and planes, but no trained aviators left to fly them. The fleet that had sailed out seeking decisive victory limped home, proving instead the absolute dominance of American air power. From this point forward, Japan could no longer challenge U.S. naval operations. The Battle of the Philippine Sea became the turning point, not just in the Pacific, but in the very nature of naval warfare. Radar coordination, communications, and fighter control, innovations perfected in this battle, became the model every post-war Navy would follow. Protecting the pilot through armor, training, and survivability replaced the pre-war acceptance of high attrition as the cost of war. The rugged F6F Hellcat itself would continue to serve into the Korean War, adapted for ground attack missions that showcased its power and durability. In the end, it was American industry that sealed Japan's fate. The U.S. could outbuild, outtrain, and outfight its opponent in every measurable way. Factories produced thousands of aircraft each month. Training centers turned out pilots fast and well. Every American loss could be replaced several times over, while every Japanese loss was permanent. The production numbers told the story. In 1944, America built 96,000 aircraft. Japan, despite total mobilization, produced only 28,000. The Hellcat alone claimed 5,223 confirmed kills for just 270 losses in air combat, a 19-to-1 ratio, the highest of any American fighter. It accounted for 3/4 of all Navy aerial victories, even though it joined the war halfway through. The Hellcat's design, emphasizing protection, firepower, and ease of flight, proved far more effective than chasing raw speed or agility. Pilots consistently praised its forgiving handling and ability to take heavy damage yet stay in the fight. After the Marianas turkey shoot, Japan's naval air arm never recovered. What remained was thrown into desperate kamikaze missions. Pilots sacrificed themselves because they could no longer win through combat skill. Decades of accumulated experience, training, and doctrine vanished in a single day's fighting. The once feared Zero, symbol of Japanese air power, now stood as a relic of a bygone era. The psychological blow went far beyond military defeat. It shattered the illusion that willpower and spirit could triumph over technology and industry. The Battle of the Philippine Sea was the culmination of America's journey from the humiliation of Pearl Harbor to absolute mastery of naval warfare.
The same carrier forces Japan once sought to destroy in 1941 had returned, multiplied tenfold, armed with better planes, better pilots, and better doctrine. Through relentless production, innovation, and analysis, the U.S. Navy had transformed from reactive defense to unstoppable offense. The Hellcat became the very symbol of that transformation, the embodiment of technological evolution and strategic purpose. In his after-action report, Admiral Mitcher praised the totality of the victory but warned against complacency. He noted that radar, fighter control, and superior aircraft had created perfect conditions for success, but cautioned that future enemies might seek asymmetric ways to counter such dominance. His foresight would soon prove accurate, as Japan turned to kamikaze tactics in a last, desperate attempt to challenge American power. Beneath the numbers, the human reality remained. American pilots spoke of the surreal experience shooting down multiple planes with ease, feeling both triumph and pity for opponents flying outdated machines. Japanese survivors recalled the terror of watching entire squadrons wiped out, powerless to fight back. These personal stories reveal war's deeper tragedy, that progress and innovation, while decisive, always come at a terrible human cost. The Marianas Turkey Shoot entered history as the ultimate display of American air supremacy, a victory built not on luck, but on method, science, and discipline. It proved that in modern warfare, industrial power and technology will always eclipse tradition and spirit. Japan's dream of a decisive carrier victory died here, along with its naval aviation, never to rise again.
By June 1944, the Imperial Navy that once ruled the Pacific has lost all offensive strength. The consequences go far beyond one military defeat. They force a complete rethinking of warfare in the industrial age. Japan's leaders must now face an inescapable truth. No amount of bravery or tactical innovation can match America's sheer capacity to produce ships, planes, and pilot. Japan's decision to keep fighting, even when defeat is mathematically certain, reveals less a strategy than a cultural refusal to accept surrender. From that contradiction, knowing the war is lost, yet refusing to yield, the kamikaze emerges. At the same time, disaster deepens. On June 19th, U.S. submarines sink the carriers Shokaku and Taiho, compounding the aerial losses with irreplaceable ships. Shokaku, a veteran of Pearl Harbor and every major carrier battle except Midway, is fatally struck by torpedoes from USS Kavala while refueling her planes. Taiho, Japan's newest, most advanced carrier, is hit once by USS Albacore, but the resulting vapor explosion tears her apart. With them sink not just ships, but the experience and expertise of hundreds of seasoned crewmen Japan can never replace. The lessons of the Marianas Turkey Shoot set the pattern for the rest of the Pacific War. American forces continue their relentless advance. Japan's counterattacks grow increasingly desperate and futile. The same carrier task forces that had seemed fragile in 1941 now project unstoppable American power across the Pacific. What began as a struggle for survival becomes a demonstration of how industrial democracy, once mobilized, can outlast and overwhelm any autocratic rival. In the aftermath, U.S. carriers remain off Saipan, launching strikes at will, while Japan's shattered fleet retreats to distant anchorages beyond American air range. The invasion of the Marianas proceeds unopposed, and soon the new airfields on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam will host B-29 bombers, bringing the war to Japan's own cities. The carrier battle that was supposed to stop this outcome instead guarantees it. June 19, 1944 becomes the day American naval aviation secures undisputed mastery of the skies. Months of preparation, training, and technological progress culminate in just a few hours of combat that destroy Japan's carrier air power forever. The Hellcat fighter proves to be the weapon that turns U.S. carriers from vulnerable targets into instruments of total dominance. The pilots who fly them embody the new kind of warfare, trained systematically, produced in numbers, and deadly effective through discipline rather than instinct. The lessons of the Philippine Sea will shape air power doctrine for generations. Aircraft design now revolves around one principle: protect the pilot. Radar-guided fighter direction becomes the blueprint for modern fleet defense. The battle shows that industrial capacity, science, and training, not just courage, decide wars. Democracy's ability to mobilize and innovate proves stronger than authoritarian zeal. The human cost, however, remains immense. Hundreds of young Japanese pilots, driven by duty and hope, die in obsolete machines, their courage unmatched but their efforts meaningless against overwhelming force. Their deaths achieve nothing except to confirm America's dominance. Survivors return haunted by guilt, the shame of living when their comrades did not. For many, this becomes the lasting wound of Japan's naval air arm. The Hellcat's triumph validates a simple but revolutionary idea that a rugged, forgiving aircraft flown by well-trained pilots can outperform even elite opponents in fragile machines demanding perfection. The Zero, once the symbol of mastery, becomes an anachronism, deadly only in the hands of veterans who no longer exist.
This clash of machines mirrors a deeper clash of values, one side built around preserving life and efficiency, the other around sacrifice and endurance. The Battle of the Philippine Sea ends the era when carrier warfare was a contest of equals. From this point forward, it is execution, not combat, outcomes decided before the first shot. The Japanese pilots who take off on June 19th are flying towards certain death, victims of an enemy so far ahead that no bravery can bridge the gap. The turkey shoot metaphor endures because it captures that cruel imbalance, one side hunting, the other merely surviving for seconds. Japan never recovers. Its carrier air arm dies that morning and is never reborn. Each fallen pilot represents years of irreplaceable training and knowledge, a loss Japan's truncated wartime programs can never mend. With their deaths, an entire generation of experience disappears, leaving only inadequately trained replacements to fill the void. The decline feeds on itself. Each battle claims more unprepared pilots, accelerating the collapse of what was once the finest air force in the world. June 19, 1944 marks the exact moment when Japanese naval aviation ceases to exist as a viable fighting force. The F6F Hellcat stands as the instrument of that transformation, a symbol of American mastery. With its armor, firepower, and forgiving controls, it allows ordinary pilots to achieve extraordinary results. Combined with radar warning, fighter coordination, and tight teamwork, it creates an impenetrable defensive web no Japanese formation can pierce. The battle proves beyond question that industrial democracy, with its science, organization, and adaptability, can defeat militarism built on spirit and tradition. The Marianas Turkey Shoot becomes the defining moment of American air supremacy in the Pacific. By war's end, Japan's once mighty carriers are little more than floating targets powerless against waves of American planes. The arc from Pearl Harbor's shock to the Philippine Sea's triumph completes the greatest military turnaround in history. The Battle of the Philippine Sea stands as lasting proof that freedom, when fully mobilized, can outthink, outbuild, and outfight tyranny. It is the moment when democracy's arsenal, fueled by reason, courage, and will, ensured that the Pacific would never again belong to the rising sun.